While we were working our way through our preferences, we briefly went over the test tone and said we would come back to it, and now it's that time. So the test tone was built into Ableton in order to identify problems within your rig, your computer, your hardware, before they occur in an actual recording or something. So this is a tool that we can use to get the most out of our hardware and our computer. So the way that this works is we have an on and off switch here, and you can hear just a little sine wave going off, and the quality of that sine wave is going to be a really important piece of information. So right now, if we listen to it, it just sounds like a normal sine wave. Nothing really funny is going on at all. So now we can control the volume of the actual sine wave. Let's turn it up a bit so we can hear it better. We can also adjust the frequency if we wanted to. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at 440 hertz. And then we can adjust the CPU usage simulator. So what we can do here is we can emulate 80% CPU usage. Ableton will act as though it's under the amount of stress that we set here in the usage simulator. So with this at 80, we hit on. If we take a look up here at the CPU usage indicator, you can see that Ableton is acting as though it's at 80%. So this allows us to test out different buffer sizes. And again, we talked about buffer size as being the amount of time you give your computer to make analog and digital conversions. So basically, the better computer you have, the lower buffer size you'll be able to use. And you really want to use a lower buffer size when you're actually recording things like vocals and instruments or anything involving a microphone. Basically, this is going to make it so that you have the least amount of latency possible. As you can see right now, our overall latency is about 7 milliseconds, and that can definitely make a difference in a recording environment. So right now, I'm going to go to my hardware setup, and we're going to test a lower buffer size. And things still sound fine. There's no audible distortion, there's no clicks or pops, so let's even take this a bit lower. So now with a buffer size of 64, we are still not having problems. Let's see if we can go even lower. And we're still not having any clicks, pops, or distortion. So this lets me know that when I'm recording, I can push my CPU pretty hard. We can use a buffer size of 32 samples and get away with that and have an overall latency of 5 milliseconds. So this is really important information for me because it lets me know how I want to set up my preferences when I'm doing something that involves recording. It lets me know that I want to go to as low a buffer size as possible. Now, I'm going to show you a clip of a buffer size that does not work with a computer and kind of what the test tone will sound like. So here's that. So we'll go ahead and test 64 samples. You'll hear no distortion. That sounds good to go. We'll push it to 32 samples. And I hear some audible clicks and pops. Now, as you heard, there was a lot of clicking and popping and some actual audible distortion. So anytime your test tone sounds like that, you should know that the buffer size that you have set up currently is too low. You need to raise it a little bit and give your computer some headroom. Now, although a lower buffer size is ideal for recording, this does actually put a lot of strain on your computer. So when you're doing something that doesn't involve recording, like you're mixing or you're mastering, you can really raise your buffer size, and it's actually recommended to do so. The latency is not really going to affect you because you're just listening to playback. So a good rule of thumb is to really increase your buffer size when you are not recording, because this will give you extra headroom. You'll be able to add more devices to your tracks and process them a little bit more, and it's just going to make everything a bit more smooth. However, on that same hand, when you are doing something that involves recording, you're really going to want to lower your buffer size and get the least amount of latency possible that your rig can handle. So spend some time right now identifying the minimum buffer size that your computer and your hardware will allow you to use. Jot that down on a piece of paper and keep it in mind, because every time you're recording, you're going to want to come back to these preferences before you hit the record button and make sure that your buffer size is set up properly.